So with variables, we saw how we could create something which contained a value, and then we could change that value later on and use it in our code to achieve something. Arrays take variables one step further and allow us to store a number of different values in one object. Now that sounds a bit weird until you've seen it in action. So let's just tidy things up a little and create an array. There's a few different ways of creating arrays in JavaScript. I'm going to show you the most common ones here. We actually use the keyword var as before to create them. So arrays are just variables, but different types of variables. And we'll call it my array. And then to tell JavaScript that we want to create an array, we use the command new and then array. And we use parentheses because this is a function which creates an array for us. So now we've got an empty array and we want to fill it with some values. So let's say we want to store some food items in this particular array for some reason. What we would do is we would take my array and specify which entry in the array we wanted to edit. And we normally start with 0. So arrays start at 0. So my array and then square brackets 0. And then we might set that equal to pizza. So just in the same way that we set the value of a variable, we can set the value of one item within an array. So my array 0 is now pizza. Can you set my array 1 to chocolate? Go for it. Let's have a look. You should have done something like my array square brackets 1 is equal to chocolate. There we go. So how do we get those values if we want them? Well, just in the same way that we worked with variables in the previous video. So if we want to get pizza, we could alert my array 0. Just like that. Let's refresh, and then we've got pizza there. Note, if we want to view a whole array, that's not that easy to do within the page itself, but it's very easy to do within the console. So that's how I'd recommend, if you want to check what the values of an array are while you're coding, then you can use the console log. And this is a very useful thing in general. It essentially allows you to leave comments for yourself as you're developing your app, which can help you with debugging or just generally seeing what's going on. And if we want to log the values within an array, we just console.log and then my array in parentheses. And let's then have a look. Obviously that doesn't display anything on the page itself, but if we right click, control click, and inspect, and then click on the console, it should show us, there we go. So it's array, it's got 2 values in it, and those 2 values are pizza and chocolate. Notice also we've got the length of the array, which is 2. And that's a very useful number to know how many items there are in your array, and we can get them just by using myArray.length. So that will tell us how many items there are in the array. If we have a look at that, you can see we just get returned 2 because we've got 2 items in our array here. All right. So that's all well and good, you might think, but why on earth would I need one of these? Why can't I just store these in individual variables? Well, imagine you're making something like a Twitter clone and you wanted to display a user's tweets. As you're writing the program, you don't know in advance how many tweets there are going to be because the number is going to change. Also, you definitely don't want to define a new variable for each tweet because you're going to have to come up with a huge number of variable names. That would be a very messy way to work with things. So instead, what you could do is create an array, which we might call tweets. And we're going to create this in a different way, just so that you can see a different way to create an array. So instead of using new array, we can actually just assign the values of the array right at the start. So incidentally, just a pair of square brackets there will create an empty array. So it does the same thing as that line. But if we want to put some values in, we might have, what's the sort of thing people might tweet? Morning, everybody, something like that. and they might say, I love coffee, that kind of thing. What a Twitter feed this would be. So now what we've got here is 2 tweets within our tweets array. And hopefully this gives you a bit of a clue as to why arrays are so powerful. Because we could add as many tweets as we wanted to this array, display them all, we could delete ones, we can edit them, but we only have a single variable name to deal with. And it kind of makes sense. It's just a single variable called tweets. We don't need a different variable name for each of these because they're all tweets. So pretty much any web app you could imagine is going to need arrays to store lists of data. So you think of an email client, for example, has to store the user's contacts, the user's emails, and all sorts of other information that you don't know how many items there are going to be. And in that situation, arrays are perfect. So it's a very quick challenge. Can you alert the I love coffee tweet? Just to make sure that you've got the hang of how arrays work. Go for it. All right, hope you did it. Pretty easy. Just alert, and then we want tweets 1. That was the only slight trick. You might have forgotten that arrays start at 0 and thought that that was number 1, and then attempted to alert tweets 2, and then got an error because tweets 2 doesn't exist. So this is tweets 0, and I love coffee is tweets 1. Let's just have a look. There we go. Brilliant. So what if we want to add a third tweet to our list? So our user has just come along and tweeted something just as exciting as these 2 tweets, and we want to add it to their list of tweets. That's pretty easy. We can use the command push. So tweets.push will add a third item to this array at the end of the array. And then we give the value that we want to add onto the end of our tweets array. So what's the sort of thing this guy might say? Maybe something like back to work, because he's hilarious. So that will add back to work onto the end of the array. So very quickly, can you log to the console the tweets array so we can have a look and see what's inside it now? Hope you remembered that it's just console.log and then whatever we want to log. So in this case, the tweets array. So let's take a look, refresh the page, and then Control or right click and inspect. And there we go. So there's our array. It's got a length of 3, so 3 items in it. Morning everybody, I love coffee, and back to work. Fantastic. What about removing items from arrays? That's pretty easy to do as well. We've got a command for it within JavaScript. And this is splice, which allows us to do actually a lot more than just deleting, but I'll show you how we can get rid of one of these tweets. So let's, for example, decide that our tweeter decides that his I love coffee tweet was rather inane and wanted to delete it. Then we would give the splice command 2 variables. Firstly, the number of the item in the array that we wanted to start deleting. So remember, morning everybody is the 0th item, I love coffee is number 1, and back to work is number 2, just as it says over here on the left. So if I wanted to delete I love coffee, we'd start at number 1, because I love coffee is number 1. And then if we just wanted to delete that one, then we would say I want to delete 1 tweet starting at item 1. So that should delete just I love coffee. And there we go. Now you can see we've got left morning everybody and back to work. So what we're doing here is we're passing 2 variables to this splice function, and they give the function a bit of information. So it says start deleting at item number 1 and delete 1 item. So can you change our splice function so that we delete both I love coffee and back to work? How would we do that? All right, hope you got it. All we need to do is change the second number to a 2, and that will then instruct it to delete 2 items starting at item number 1. So let's have a look. We should just be left with morning everybody. Perfect. We can also use the splice function to add in items. So let's say we wanted to add in a tweet before I love coffee. Then what we would do is we say, I want to add my new tweet at number 1. I don't want to delete any tweets. And the content of the new tweet that I want to add in is, I don't know, cornflakes for breakfast. And of course, the requisite exclamation mark. So this should add in the item cornflakes for breakfast just before item number 1. Let's have a look. There we go. So now we've got morning everybody, cornflakes for breakfast, I love coffee, and back to work. Very quick challenge for you. How could you change Splice now to, instead of just adding in cornflakes for breakfast, replace I love coffee with cornflakes for breakfast? Go for it. Did you manage it? It's actually pretty straightforward. We just change the 0 to a 1. And this will mean we want to add in a new item before tweet number 1, but we also want to delete tweet number 1 and then add in cornflakes for breakfast. So we should now have just 3 tweets without I love coffee. There you go. And you can add in as many items as you like here as well. As many inane tweets as you can imagine, just by separating them with commas. So if our tweeter felt that cornflakes for breakfast wasn't enough information, he might add a num num tweet immediately after. Let's have a look. There we go. So we've now got morning everybody, cornflakes for breakfast, num num, and back to work. Alright, there's a huge amount more that you can do with arrays, but that's as far as we're going to go for now, because I don't want you to have to memorize lots of different array functions, but as we need them, we'll come back to them and see what else we can do with arrays. You'll notice that what we've got here is pure code. We don't actually have any content in our page at all. And increasingly in the JavaScript section and the next section, we're going to be looking at more complex code to do more advanced things. And this is really what programming or coding is all about. It's not so much about the layout of your page as the logic behind it. And that's where things get really powerful and I think really exciting. And talking of logic, we're going to learn our first logic command in the next video, and that is the if statement. See you there.